take you out to this live image that we do have showing up right here on your screen. This is a live look over Gaza at this hour, and I want to get to the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. The top leader of Hamas is in Egypt, we're told, for talks on another ceasefire and hostage swap. The talks come a day after Hamas fired rockets that sent off sirens in central Israel, though it is important to note here that Hamas has been firing rockets at Israel for months now. We also know Israeli intelligence officials have reportedly met with the head of the CIA and Qatari officials to talk about the same here, another deal. Israel also calling on the rest of the world to blacklist Hamas as a terrorist organization, saying that it must be destroyed. I want to talk more about all of this and the latest developments, so let's bring in Tal Heinrich, a spokesperson for the Israeli government, joining us now live once again to talk about all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on today, Josh.
Of course. Well, first off, I want to talk about the possible next negotiation, the next possible ceasefire hostage swap. Where does everything stand at this point? Because we learned earlier on this week that the head of the CIA and Qatari officials were meeting with Israeli officials to talk about all of this. So where does it stand?
As you know, Josh, and I know that Fox News Live has been reporting this very closely, we've had a framework that was agreed upon, according to which Hamas has released some of the hostages, and then they just broke the agreement and they started firing at us. They could not deliver another group of hostages to be released, and here we are today discussing this yet again. We said that we will bring about the release of all hostages one way or another. We will continue to pursue every possible avenue, and the only reason as for why we've seen the release of some of the hostages so far is the military pressure that we have exerted on Hamas. You see, we're hitting them hard. They wanted a breather last time, and for that reason, they have agreed to that outline that was mediated. So we will do whatever it takes to bring our sons and daughters, elderly, back home. It's been more than 2 months now. We're talking about 129 people. This is simply unacceptable.
Has the accidental killing of those 3 Israeli hostages by the IDF, we've heard a lot of talk about that, especially from the IDF, has that changed anything about the war itself, including the need or possibility here for a ceasefire?
That was a very, very tragic incident. As you said, you know, these 3 hostages, they tried to do everything they could think of in order not to appear as a threat to our forces operating in Shaja'iyya, one of the most difficult battle zone, and yet they were mistakenly identified as a threat and were shot at. You know, that area is filled with booby traps, with ambushes. These Hamas terrorists, sometimes they dress up as, many times, they dress up as civilians. They play sound in Hebrew, even voices of children, to try to lure in our forces so they can exchange fire with them. So we've had multiple fatal encounters over there in Shaja'iyya, but we are drawing the very, very important lessons, because an incident of this kind, it can never ever reoccur again. You know, it's the worst possible scenario that we could have imagined, and our forces should have been better ready for such a scenario in which some of the hostages might have been able to flee their terrorist Hamas captors. But again, to your question, we will continue to exert military pressure on Hamas, because this is the only thing that can bring about the conditions that will eventually lead to another framework, if you will. That's the only reason why we've seen the release of some hostages so far.
And I want to talk a little bit about Hamas leader Sinwar here. We know that the IDF has reported that they have been in several tunnels where they believe that Sinwar may have been just moments, minutes before they arrived. What can you tell me about that?
What I can tell you, I'm not commenting here on any kind of operational military activity happening on the ground or strategy moving ahead, but what I can say is that Yahya Sinwar, he signed his own death sentence on October 7th.
All right, well, reports are also starting to circulate that one of the hostages, Noah Argamani, was not taken by Hamas, but rather by Gaza civilians. What do we know, if anything, about that right now? Again, those reports started to surface about 24 hours ago. What can you tell me?
You and I, we don't want to speculate, of course. Human lives hang in the balance here. Noah Argamani, I can tell you that her story is personally, to me, it's the top of mind. She's 25-year-old. Everyone have seen her video of how she was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival in the South. And, you know, her mother is dying of cancer. So every moment, every second counts. This family has been going through a torture of mind, body, and soul. We must bring her back, and we will continue to do everything possible to bring about her release. But you see, we know for a fact that not only Hamas terrorists abducted our people, our children, our elderly, our sons and daughters, also members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the second largest terrorist organization in Gaza, and also civilians in Gaza. As you saw on October 7th in multiple videos, some of them documented, by the way, by Hamas terrorists themselves. There are many civilians that broke the border and infiltrated into Israel to participate in the massacre.
And I want to talk more a little bit about a potential ceasefire here, as we know that France, the UK, Germany, they've kind of joined the global calls for a ceasefire. The U.S., of course, has not. Does any of that concern the Israeli government right now as the war is ongoing?
You see, countries of good conscience, with moral sense, with moral clarity and common sense, understand what Israel is doing. We are fighting a pure evil called Hamas here. Any kind of ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power with the ability, with the desire, with the military capability to perpetrate the October 7th massacre for a second, a third, a fourth time, as they said they would, is simply unacceptable. And any kind of ceasefire, of course, that will leave our hostages in Gaza, that is unacceptable. Israel is sending an unequivocal message against terrorism, not only to bad players, bad actors in our region, not only to Hamas, but around the world. So, you know, some of these countries, they need to better understand this, because I am sure that if it were them, they would not have tolerated anything on the scope and brutality of October 7th, and more so, you know, 16 years of hostilities, of firing missiles towards Israeli territory from Hamas.
And my last question here before I let you go. The UN Security Council is expected to meet and to vote on calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. We know the U.S. did veto a vote earlier on this month. That could, of course, happen again. But if that is approved for whatever reason there, would that mean anything to Israel overall? We know it is legally binding, but does it really change anything?
Well, I guess you and I will have to have this conversation once again. We'll see how the vote unfolds. But I'll just repeat what I told you before. A ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power is simply unacceptable. Our nation took this decision that we will no longer live next to a terrorist enclave. There's a built-in anti-Israel bloc in the United Nations. We have zero expectations from this body, and we are very thankful for our friends out there, like our best friends in Washington, who simply get it.
All right, Tal Heinrich there with the Israeli government. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us. Is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
Thank you to the American people who know how to tell good from evil, right from wrong, and for standing by Israel. That's what I want to add. That's it.
All right, Tal, thank you again. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and stay safe.
Thank you, Josh.